Remember, remember, the 10th of November. Doesn't quite have the same ring to it, does it? It's Nathan, it's again hammock time, and I'm sitting along the banks of the Fox River. I would tell you what place I am in, except there is a large sign that says please don't step off the path, and I have very obviously stepped off the path to be here. In regard to the question you posed in your last video, Nathan, yes, I think you ought to keep the beard. Until huge splotches of gray come into that thing, keep it as long as you possibly can. Nathan, a mere 5 days ago was Guy Fawkes Day, and Guy Fawkes, for people who might be watching this and don't know, was a protester against a largely Protestant government in England. He was a Catholic, and he decided that to best make his point about how he felt about the Protestant-run government, he was going to blow up the Houses of Parliament, and thus Guy Fawkes Day was born. Most Americans, Nathan, are probably familiar with Guy Fawkes Day thanks to one influence, V for Vendetta. V for Vendetta is an excellent movie. I really enjoy it, and one of the things that I enjoy about V for Vendetta is I watch it every year on Guy Fawkes Day. And by watching V for Vendetta, it tells me a little bit about myself. It's a guide point. It's kind of a connection. For example, a few years ago, the whole Occupy Wall Street thing was going on while Guy Fawkes Day was also going on. And I was really sympathetic to the Occupy Wall Street movement because I don't think it's right that a huge amount of the wealth in our country, maybe even our world, is controlled by a very slim number of people. And thus, when I watched V for Vendetta, it spoke to that reality. Every year it's kind of a little mile marker for what do I think about government? What do I think about politics? What do I think about the people who are presently in power of our world? So I ask myself this year, Nathan, as I have watched V for Vendetta a mere 5 days ago, what exactly do I feel about the people who are in power and the people who are in charge of the world? Not a whole lot. I don't think a whole lot of them. And this isn't a Democrat statement, this isn't a Republican statement. This is a statement purely made by somebody who's a follower of Jesus Christ and who recently discovered that, hey, I hadn't been putting a whole lot of stock into the way Jesus says we ought to be running the world. So what do I mean by that? That's a very good question. There's a certain set of principles that Jesus outlined that his followers really ought to be running the world by. Taking care of the poor, taking care of the marginalized, making sure that people aren't intentionally excluded from any of the benefits of society. His society meaning followers of him. Government exists for a very particular reason, and that is to perpetuate government. If it's not in the best interests of government, government doesn't do it. Government doesn't really care about the poor, the marginalized, the sick, the hungry. The only reason they care about any of those people is when it comes in direct relation to protecting the government. Really look at some government programs. Are they trying to alleviate hunger? Are they really trying to heal the sick? Are they really trying to bring the marginalized back? So how does all that relate to my watching V for Vendetta this year? Well, something that I noticed as I was watching V for Vendetta this year is V uses violence to fight violence. I have a problem with this. I never saw it before, but I have a problem with this. Since over the summer I've read the very excellent book A Farewell to Mars by Brian Zond. I also met Brian Zond, and I also started working in a situation where small children get into disagreements on a regular basis. And a lot of times I hear the phrase, my parents told me that if somebody hits me, I have the right to hit them back. So usually I look at the kids and I say something like this, hey kids, if somebody hits you, what does that make them? And the answer is usually, it makes them bad. So if you hit somebody, even if they've hit you first, what does that make you? Bad. They realize this. Children realize this. The grown-ups in our world seem to have lost track of this. V, the main character in the movie, seems to have lost track of this. Now what you're probably sitting there thinking as you watch this, Nathan, is that by the end of the movie, yes, V does come to realize that he is a product of the broken society that is all around him that he is trying to kick back against. And that in the new society that he inaugurates by his destruction of Parliament and everyone showing up in Trafalgar Square with Guy Fawkes masks on, that he doesn't really have a part in that world. And that's true. But it still led me to ask myself, as a follower of Jesus, can I really endorse using violent means to get to a pleasant end? And after all of my reading this summer, and after all of my thinking, I'm not sure that I can justify that. So Nathan, before I leave my little hiding spot along the Fox River, I wanted to give a little present for our followers. I know you own at least one copy of V for Vendetta, and I recently bought V for Vendetta as the very first Blu-ray I ever owned. But it was one of those Blu-ray DVD download combo packs, and I don't really have a use for the download. So I am now going to allow our followers, whoever gets there first, a free download of V for Vendetta. Cheers, Nathan. I'll see you soon.